Great. Okay, and as you may know, this is actually the second webinar of a series of two. The first was done a few weeks ago, and in that webinar, let me see. I forgot to ask you to introduce yourselves. All right, I'll go back and do that in a second. Um, and in that webinar, I took up the idea or the question of how we can radically transform students' outcomes in developmental mathematics, and really thinking through a host of different outcomes that we would want to consider that are priorities for not only us and our work with the Carnegie Math Pathways, but also we believe matters for so many people in the field, in two-year institutions and four-year institutions all around the country. Um, and I talked about how, these four big ideas that, of course, we need to support students to complete, and there are lots of sort of structural initiatives and movements underway with respect to completion. And then also, of course, students' persistence, which is closely related to their completion. But of course, we need to also think about the quality of learning that they're experiencing and developing along the way. And finally, none of this could really happen if we don't meaningfully and in a sustained way, if we don't really consider the development of students' identities as learners. And with that as a backdrop, then I addressed at a 40,000 foot level, three big questions. The first having to do with course structure and design. The second having to do with designing mathematics learning in terms of curriculum and instruction. And the third having to do with how we systemically can sustain and continuously improve student success outcomes. Um, if you're interested in diving into those at all and didn't go to the first webinar, I encourage you to go get a recording. Today, we thought we would take time to delve more deeply into this second question. As I mentioned, it really has to do with how you can design curriculum and what are the different important features of effective instruction to promote students' persistence and engagement and the quality of their learning in mathematics classrooms. And with that, I'm going to go back. And there's only three of us here right now, but it would help us out a little bit to give us a little context. Write us in this chat box a quick intro to yourself, indicating what kind of institution you're in, whether you're a faculty member or administrator, what your primary discipline is for which you are responsible, and give us a little sense of what you want to learn in the next hour with us. Great. Okay, that's helpful. Your tribal faculty, math faculty, teach remedial courses. Great. All right. Um, and I don't know if people are probably not still writing. It would tell me. But hopefully you'll want to learn something about how to best support students in mathematics classrooms to engage and persist and learn mathematics that sustains and is powerful for them. For Edith, I think a lot of this is probably going to be really applicable to your specific context. Of course, the Carnegie Math Pathways are focused on developmental math students. Um, okay, let me see. Let's move this up so I think. Yeah. Um, so the Carnegie math pathways, from which we're going to be about which we're going to be speaking today, and from which we draw our lessons about our thoughts and principles for effective mathematics instruction, um, is a solution that the Carnegie Foundation designed to help students who place into developmental mathematics um, achieve college level, sorry, go to and through college level mathematics credit. So it supports them in not only achieving their developmental mathematics requirement, but then also in either the topic of statistics or the topic of quantitative reasoning, depending on the pathway, also achieve their college credit. So there are lots of elements to the design of the Carnegie Math Pathways solutions. In the last webinar, I went through these. Here, I'm only going to mention them quite briefly. The first is an accelerated cohort-based pathway, meaning we take the what is traditionally the course sequence, which could be 3, 4, sometimes even 5 different courses through the developmental pathway and into college level mathematics, and accelerate them into 2 terms, and in some cases into a single term. We do have folks doing an even more accelerated version. And as I mentioned, one of the pathways is focused on college level statistics, and the other pathway takes students through college level quantitative reasoning. The design of those courses, besides sort of embodying an accelerated path, reflects what is best known about the design of curriculum and pedagogy. And it's those 4, the ambitious, relevant, problem-centered curriculum, student-focused, collaborative pedagogy, productive persistence, interventions, and practices that we are going to be focusing on today. I want to just note that our curriculum and pedagogy also includes significant language and literacy supports, because we know that a large barrier for student persistence and success in developmental mathematics for many of our students has to do with reading comprehension and um, and reading and writing in the discipline. Of course, all of this is quite a heavy lift for faculty, so a big part of our solution are comprehensive and sustained professional learning opportunities for faculty, everything from support and training when faculty begin teaching the pathways, and then supporting them while they continue to teach the pathways. And we offer, in addition, ongoing professional learning communities around specific high leverage topics for instructors. And then finally, the pathways are more than just instruction, more than just an instructional system or curriculum and pedagogy. Really, we engage one another in a network, and that we are in a network provides not only a structure for sharing knowledge, but it also is a way for us to accelerate our learning across the network so that we are continuously improving what we're doing and pushing that knowledge out to the rest of the network, and then, as in the case of this webinar, to the rest of the field. Okay, so that's very, very quick intro to all the major components. I did want to take a moment to say a little bit about our success to date, kind of along the lines of, well, why should you believe anything that we're saying? Statway is one of the 2 pathways. Statway and Quantway are the 2 pathways, and I'm just going to show you the success rates for Statway to save a little bit of time. Quantway is very, very similar. So what this shows you are the last 5 years of success results for the Statway students in the network. These results come from analysis that uses propensity score matching. And what that means is that for every student, for every Statway student enrolled in a particular college, this analysis matched them with 5 or more students along many, many dimensions, 40 plus dimensions, who were not in Statway but took the parallel traditional sequence. And then we looked at their outcomes, in this case, in terms of the completion of college level credit. So what you see here is the Statway results within a single year. So these are success rates, meaning students achieve C or higher within a single year or 2 terms. And you can see it hovers right around 50%, and it has hovered right around 50% even as enrollment is increasing. And you can see that with the blue line graph that runs through this. By contrast, in the lighter purple, you see the match comparison results. So this is the success rate for the matched students in the traditional path within 2 years. So the comparison group is basically allowed 2 years to complete the developmental sequence, because oftentimes, of course, the developmental sequence is more than just a single year. So in our match comparison analysis, we look at a single year Statway completion rate as compared to a 2-year match comparison completion rate. And you can see even with the 1-year Statway versus 2-year match comparison, Statway triples the success rate. So we believe that what we're going to be sharing with you about the design of the curriculum and the design of the pedagogy really is a major contributor to the success of many, many students in our Statway project. The propensity score matching analysis also allows us to look at gains across the demographic subgroups. And again, the dark blue is Statway success in a single year as compared to the light purple, which is match comparison within 2 years. And you can see that there are significant gains across all of the subgroups. I'm actually going to stop for just a second. And if anybody has a question at this point, I'd be happy to take it before we move on to looking closely at the curriculum and instruction.
And people, you can just use the chat room if you have any questions. We're not going to turn the individual mics on for people.
Okay. All right, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so if you recall, I said that we're going to focus today on that second question of 3. How can we best support powerful mathematics learning and students' persistence and engagement? And we're going to take up a couple of important ideas with respect to that. So about the curriculum being productively challenging and relevant to students' lives, and also employing instruction that promotes the development of what we call flexible expertise, and does so by engaging students actively and collaboratively. That's what I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to hand it over to Rachel Beatty, our Director of Productive Persistence, to talk to you more about this notion of productive persistence and how that's integrated in the curriculum and instruction and how that supports students' engagement and success. Okay, so it appears that I think, John, this is the wrong version, but that's all right. Okay, I'll just talk about this. Let's do this way. Okay, so I'm going to start with this notion of flexible versus routine expertise. So these ideas come out of the research in cognitive science that sought to understand the different ways that human cognition allows us to be expert at something and the different kinds of expertise that we develop. And the notion of routine expertise is something that should be fairly familiar. It's the kind of thing that has been typically seen as the goal in traditional mathematics courses for a very long time. So it's the kind of expertise where a person develops a lot of fluency in a particular procedure and can reproduce that procedure with accuracy and reliability over time. So they get very, very good at routines is basically the idea. In contrast, there's this notion of flexible expertise. So flexible expertise encompasses not only this notion of procedural fluency, but also the underlying conceptual understanding that is needed to make sense of what the procedures are and why you're doing them. And then also the conceptual understanding in order to in order to make the connections between the procedures and the facts and the mathematical ideas that are involved with any particular topic. Importantly, flexible expertise also includes the disposition to make and to think mathematically and to make sense of mathematics, and importantly, to understand mathematics as a sense-making enterprise. Um, and then finally, the goal really is to bring that disposition, the conceptual understanding, the procedural fluency together in order to nimbly bring that knowledge to bear across a wide array of new situations. The goal then fundamentally is about the flexibility of applying your mathematical knowledge. And I think all of us could agree that that's really what we're after now. We're less interested, I think, in terms of students at the end of the day, as students being able to regurgitate or produce procedures fluently, as we are in the more ambitious goal of being able to harness not only that, but a lot of different kinds of knowledge and understanding in order to apply their mathematics as a tool in the world around us. So that's what we're after. So the research says a lot of things about how to support students' development of flexible expertise. And in our early work with researchers of a whole bunch of different domains, we boiled those ideas down to three. The first is this notion of productive struggle, that students really need to be challenged productively in the mathematics, in the major mathematics ideas, the core mathematical ideas. But not in ways that are overly frustrating for them or that are unproductive, meaning they get stuck on things that are going to produce frustration without engaging them in the cognitive challenge of the key mathematical ideas. So this notion of the productivity of the struggle is really important. The second idea is explicit connections. Um, and this derives from research that says that robust understandings of a domain really arise when students' understandings are connect the procedures and concepts and facts and ideas in robust ways. That allows them to be able to move from one idea to a procedure to a concept in ways that allow them to be more flexible when they face mathematical situations. So in terms of instruction, then, we need to be sure to explicitly provide opportunities for students to make those connections, and also explicitly to make those connections for students when necessary. The third idea is deliberate practice. So, of course, in mathematics, and in lots of domains, practicing for mastery is a key idea. But the notion of deliberate practice moves us away from the kinds of practice that we have typically seen, which is a kind of drill and kill or rote practice of procedures. Deliberate practice is the kind of carefully sequenced exposure to mathematical tasks in which the tasks increase in terms of their complexity and their sophistication. They also vary so that students exercise their different understandings and they exercise the connections between the concepts, procedures, and ideas and facts. These sequences of tasks are very deliberate, and it also means that they are richer contexts in which students build on their previous understandings and stretch themselves beyond where they currently are, hence making the practice actually a learning experience in and of itself. So those are the big ideas that sort of undergird the pathways, curriculum, and pedagogy. So take 1 minute to talk about the curriculum. The curriculum of Statway and Quantway, of course, are built upon ambitious learning goals. And by the way, the learning goals for Statway were developed in partnership with representatives from colleges and universities around the country, as well as representation from the major mathematical societies and statistical societies. Same thing for Quantway with respect to the major mathematical societies. And the curricular materials are designed using authentic and relevant problem situations. Every single lesson in Quantway and Statway is centered or grounded in a problematic situation in some way that reflects some kind of aspect of the real world. That also means, of course, that the data that are used are generally real data and current data. So we believe that this not only helps students be interested in what the content is, and hence is a lever for engagement, but also importantly, it's a scaffold for understanding the motivation for the mathematical um, idea or the major mathematical concept at hand. By providing a real world context that students are engaged in as an entry point, it makes the actual mathematics more accessible to students. The pedagogy is designed to support that kind of curriculum using student-centered pedagogical practices that support students' engagement in productive struggle and that also take multiple opportunities within a lesson and across lessons to draw out the connections that are critically important for students developing understanding. Um, in our work with our faculty, supporting them to enact that kind of pedagogy using those curriculum materials, we have found that it's really important to provide explicit scaffolds for faculty to guide what it is that they're doing in the classroom. That comes in a number of different ways. In the curriculum materials, for example, we have detailed, explicit teaching notes for every single lesson that lays out not only suggestions for how you might present a particular task, but then also tips about what's typically difficult for students or language that you might want to take a moment and discuss with students. And or anticipated students' responses to challenging tasks so that you as an instructor are prepared walking in the door for what it is your students might be producing and that you need to support. One such scaffold, another such scaffold is what we call the problem cycle routine. And this is an instructional routine with 4 phases that we support our instructors in understanding and then implementing in the teaching of our lessons. So this is based on research done on effective mathematics instruction in K-16, especially looking at cross-cultural studies of effective mathematical teaching practices across different countries. So the problem cycle basically is a problem-centered instructional routine. You know, basically it answers the question is how can I effectively support students in entering into and then engaging one another and then learning from rich problems. This particular routine, which I'm not going to go into necessarily in detail, but it is designed to support students' productive struggle. That's a key goal. How to support collaborative learning is a critical component of the problem cycle routine, and we do a lot of work with faculty on specific instructional moves and specific student responses to look for and respond to in group work. This kind of routine helps make students' thinking and reasoning visible. We believe that that is a critical aspect of students developing understanding and developing the disposition that mathematics is a sense-making activity on the one hand. And on the other hand, it helps them develop their ability to communicate mathematically and understand the mathematical communications from others. Another key aspect or goal of this problem cycle routine is that students' mathematical contributions, their mathematical ideas, are the building blocks of the core mathematical learning outcomes for the lesson that you want your students to take away. In other words, students' contributions are valued, which creates not only a sense or a culture of acknowledging the importance of student thinking, which then supports their continued desire to contribute and participate. But it also is an important way to, for the instructor to better understand what her students are bringing into the classroom in terms of mathematical understandings and mathematical misconceptions. and be able to visibly allow students to examine and see how they work together in order to develop the main ideas of a lesson. And so finally, then, it's the teacher's job to facilitate that building of the big ideas from the students' contributions and leave them with key takeaways from that problem or from that lesson. So this problem cycle routine scaffolds instructors in doing all of that work. Okay, so that was the quick and dirty about the curriculum and an aspect of the instruction. And the bulk of today, I'm going to hand over to Rachel to talk about productive persistence.
Great. Can you all hear
Mute
me?
myself.
And then, yes, great. I'm going to try and switch the page. I'll need another yes. Did you see it switch? Yay. Okay, great. So, as Anne said, I'm the director of productive persistence. And before I tell you exactly what is involved in that, I want to talk a little bit about our approach. And it's an approach I think we should take to most elements of teaching and learning, and that one we actually took in creating all elements of the system of the pathways. And what we really want to avoid is the term I have up there is solutionitis, in which you just search for the perfect widget to fix whatever you perceive the problem to be. And a lot of people will try and help you with this. So you might go, oh, I really want to help students believe they can succeed. I want to work on mindsets. And you walk down the halls, you might just get all these things thrown at you. They need career planning, study skills, wraparound supports, intrusive advising, acceleration, faculty development. We need all these things to help students develop their mindsets. And while some of that may be true, some of these may be really helpful, it's all coming from the wrong perspective. It's all just outside suggestions being thrown on top of a broken system. And instead of doing that, what you need to start at, where you need to start, is with the students and with the faculty. So the lived experience of being a student in these classes. And that's where we started. And we interviewed students, we interviewed faculty, and we got quotes like this. I'm embarrassed by suddenly how stupid I am and suddenly feeling very discouraged. I can't even tell which fraction is bigger than another or where they should fall on a number line. I feel like crying. We heard this over and over from students, and from students who are taking the same courses over and over and over again. And that's where we came up with the name, that we were seeing students being very persistent, just not productive, and not feeling very good about where they were in this class or feeling like they could even succeed in this class. And so that's where we started when we developed our framework for productive persistence. So it's all up there right now. I'll talk through the entire thing. But this framework was developed again with our faculty who teach these courses, but also with researchers who have developed brief and ineffective interventions designed at helping students learn they can learn, feel socially tied, feel that the course has value, etc. So Carol Dweck, Chris Holloman, Jeremy Jameson, some of the researchers that we worked with. But the important thing is that we came together as a community to come up with this framework and this definition. And so I'll just walk through, as I said, productive persistence. Our aim is that students continue to put forth effort during challenges, and when they do so, that they use effective strategies. And we narrowed down the factors that contribute to productive persistence to the 5 drivers you see on the right-hand side of this slide, and fully acknowledging there are many, many more aspects that can contribute to productive persistence. I believe we came up with over 100 different primary drivers, but it made this graphic really hard to read. But more importantly, it made it really hard to determine where to act first. And so we narrowed it down to the 5 most high leverage things that we can do in our classrooms. And first is we want students to believe that they are capable of learning. Many of our students actually enter our classes believing that no matter what they do in that class, they can't succeed. Next, we want students to feel socially tied to peers, faculty, the course, and I would mention the college for our admins on the call. So if they can identify as a student there, they're more likely to persist and engage in the work. We also want students to believe that the course has value. So we talk about short-term value, which is relevance. So it will help me in my daily life right now, but also long-term value, which is purpose. It's going to help me help others in the future, help me get a good job, help my family in the future. And we also want students to have the skills, habits, and know-how to succeed in a college setting. So how do you study? How do you engage in a group and class? How do you keep up with homework? But how do you also navigate financial aid, seek help from social supports if you need that? How do you regulate the stress and anxiety of studying and things like that? And last but not least, one of the reasons why we have this webinar today is that we want faculty and colleges to support students developing skills and mindsets. And so when we created this framework, it was a big win because both the practitioners and the researchers agreed on it, which was great. But that wasn't enough for us. We wanted to then see, did this actually matter for college students? So we surveyed our students about their productive persistence and categorized the responses on that survey as high risk or low risk. And just to give an example, a low risk student would be someone who believed they could succeed, didn't have very high anxiety, didn't feel stereotype threats. So again, had these mindsets and strategies in place, whereas a high risk student would be someone who felt like they didn't belong, felt like they couldn't succeed. And what you see here is not very surprising, is that those who are at high risk, 61% of those enter with below median baseline math knowledge versus 21% of the low risk students entering with below median baseline math knowledge. And what this shows us is our previous experiences in this discipline, in this subject, shape our expectancies about our success for the future, and shape our feelings about the class. What is very interesting is that this survey we gave at week 1 also predicts scores at so this is actually month 4 in the mid-course assessment, whereas 55% of the high-risk students fail the mid-course assessment versus only 28% in the low-risk group. What is extremely interesting is that after a year in the course, so the pathways are a 10-month-long course, we see that this gap is not only there, but it has widened. So 13% of students in the low-risk group have failed the end-of-course assessment versus 63% in the high-risk group. Now, the theory here is that once students enter this cycle of disengagement, it just perpetuates. So if they believe they can't succeed, believe they cannot, they don't belong, they're going to start disinvesting their effort and slowly start not engaging in those everyday behaviors that are needed for class, and then ultimately drop out or fail. And so again, we see this gap widening. And this is all really depressing, so I'm going to skip to this slide, which says that there's something we can do about it. We really need to act upfront and help students see that this environment we're creating is different, that they can learn here, that they can succeed. And so we incorporate a set of 10 activities and routines called Starting Strong during the first 4 weeks of the semester, designed to help students change these beliefs and attitudes in the first part of the class. And so here are just some standard effect size showing that we see students are more interested in math, students are more confident in math, they perceive the course as being more relevant. Their belief that math intelligence is fixed drops dramatically, as well as their anxiety and their stereotype threat. And now what I'm going to do is get into a little bit of the activities that we do in these first 4 weeks and beyond that help our students shift their beliefs. So let's focus in on growth mindset. Now, many of you have probably heard about growth mindset before, but I'm just going to make sure we're on the same page. So we actually ask our students this question at week 1 and week 4 of the course. Being a math person or not is something about you that you really can't change. Some people are good at math and other people aren't. And students respond to this with agree or disagree. And agreeing with this is equivalent to a fixed mindset, that you believe that no matter what you do, you cannot succeed at math. And over 2/3 of our students enter in with this belief. And our faculty identified this as a big priority for our work in productive persistence. And just for a formal definition, a fixed mindset is a belief that intelligence is fixed. And it can be about anything, although I'm focusing on math right now. It's a belief that if you have to try hard, that you're clearly not smart. And then there's no point in trying if you're not a natural or just naturally gifted at something. And if you perceive yourself as being dumb or not smart in a given setting, you might rely on luck. In fact, one of my students in one of my statistics class, she got a B, and she said, well, I just got lucky. And I said that was statistically unlikely that she just got lucky, but it didn't change her mind. That comment nor the grade. So even when presented with evidence that they can learn and succeed, they may still attribute it to other factors beyond themselves. Growth mindset, on the other hand, is a belief that intelligence is malleable. And when you're in a growth mindset, you believe that trying harder makes you smarter and that you can overcome learning obstacles through a combination of three things in general. So sustained effort, help from others, and use of an improved strategy. So it's not just about effort, it's also about strategy and help seeking when needed. Or as I like to say, it's not just about quantity, it's about quality of how you're studying and about the process of learning. And just a general note that these mindsets are not, this mindset is not a trait. So it's not fixed. You can actually shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And there's a couple ways that we do that. One way we do that is we actually teach them a little bit about how the brain works. Not this brain, this is actually my brain. My background is in cognitive neuroscience along with developmental psychology. I just like to show a picture of my brain. But we teach them that the brain responds to experience and you can make new neural pathways as you learn new things. And we took an article from research done with middle schoolers and we adjusted the language and the content to be more appropriate for community college students with David Yeager. And what this does is this teaches them some facts about the brain as well as some studies that are really interesting. Here's an excerpt. Most people don't know that when they practice and learn new things, parts of their brain change and get larger, a lot like muscles do. This is true even for adults, and that's actually true. It's true even for adults. So it's not true that some people are stuck being not smart or not math people. You can improve your abilities a lot as long as you practice and use good strategies. The article then goes on to show them some studies around London taxi cab drivers about how their hippocampi are larger than normal because they have to navigate the city. There's a study about people randomly assigned to learn how to juggle and how parts of their brain have changed in response to that. And so again, some engaging studies, not always about math. After they read this article, it's really important for them to reflect. And so we guide them through 4 different things. And I really want you to take note of these 4, because many of you might actually talk about growth mindset, but it's really important to do these 4 things. One is have them summarize just briefly what they read and what they learned, just to make sure we're on the same page. Number 2 is have them relate it to an experience outside of the current topic. So we have them talk about a time that they learned that was not math related, or that they saw someone else learn. So many of them talk about learning how to drive or watching a brother or sister learn a new skill. And then the third thing is they write a letter to a future student telling them about what they learned in this article. So then they are actually conveying the information to someone else, and this increases their buy-in of this information. There's belief that this is actually true. And then the fourth thing, one I don't actually see advocated many other places, but I strongly advocate for, is have them immediately engage in a rich, challenging task in your content. So we have them immediately engage in a rich, challenging mathematics problem to show them that this does apply in math, that there's no alien race of math people, that you're not predetermined whether you can succeed at math or not, but you can actually learn math through sustained effort, help-seeking, use of strategies. And here is actually a response from one of our students this is a letter to a future student. Sorry, the first part is cut off, but there's something different in our learning process. You and me both should work together in order to succeed. Give it our all and do it because it's our last semester, which means we're all in at the finish line and it's no time to give up now. If we have to put in extra hours of studying, let's do it. If we do not understand the material, let's ask for help or even go to the tutoring. Let's finish this last math course with a bang because there are more things to learn up ahead, which I love. I always love when they mention learning even more math in the future. And when we actually did an RCT, randomized control trial with this article before putting it in our courses, we see that compared to just a control article with facts about the brain, those students who read the growth mindset article, only 9% of them withdrew from developmental math courses versus 20% in that control condition. So again, a 51% decrease in dropout rates, takes about 40 minutes and costs $0. And so that's one of the big ways. It's an initial jolt showing them that this class is different. How we think about math in this class is different than other classes. And you can see that reflected in just student emails and responses after the class. One student said, I feel very confident because I dedicate my time to learn the concepts thoroughly. I feel that if one person put in the work to really understand the concepts, they can pass. I was never really a math person, but coming into Statways completely made a 360-degree turn about how I feel about math. It is great. So just as an aside, we don't cover geometry in the pathways. So if we ignore the 360 degrees comment or reframe it as one of our faculty said, that's a revolution. That's usually how I like to think of it. But what you see the student here is formally very unsure about math, very fearful of math, now saying they're very confident and understanding how they can learn in the future, which is something we see them taking to their future classes. One other area, besides focusing directly on student beliefs themselves, is focusing on the classroom culture that supports a growth mindset. And we have been working to incorporate everyday phrases or language to support a student's growth mindset throughout the pathways. And the overall goal here is to emphasize the process of learning. So that we want students to know that they can control that process, again, which is made up of sustained effort, good strategies, and help seeking. And we base this work on a study that PERTS has done with Khan Academy, in which they're just using these online fractions modules and inserting messages, either a placebo, so if at first you don't succeed, try again, or a growth mindset phrase, such as when you learn a new kind of math problem, you grow your math brain. And even just this small addition, this very small phrase here in italics, when they saw a growth mindset message, it led to a 4 to 5% increase in learning rates. So these small messages are large and powerful carriers of this belief that you can succeed in math. Here are some concrete examples. So when you're praising a student after success, you could say, you're improving, your efforts are really paying off. So that you're noticing and improving, it's a process rather than you're really good at that. So again, that's just binary, yes, you did it, no, you're not, and looking whether someone is good or not. So again, praise the process, not the outcome. Encouragement after difficulty, you could say struggling on this assignment doesn't mean you can't get it. It means you're learning. Your brain is making connections that are not yet strong. What this is great about this is it normalizes the element of struggle in learning, which Anne talked about earlier, we call productive struggle. And that it's not a sign that you can't ever learn, it's actually a sign that you're grappling with the material and developing a richer understanding. And that's instead of something like, well, not everyone could get an A on that test, just try to do better somehow. And so again, we're perpetuating the belief that some people could get A's, it's not you. And the unhelpful suggestion, just try to do better, when the strategy they just tried didn't really work, you're giving them no help there. So that's just something to reflect on encouragement after difficulty. Now let's look at this one. Critical feedback is another high leverage time to use growth mindset language. So I really like your ideas. Most of your writing didn't really make sense, but I can see you're passionate. Now, many of us were trained, maybe not directly trained, but indirectly, to give something positive before you give something negative and then end on a positive note. And you get this kind of compliment sandwich, which is, as you look at it closer, falls apart. So there's nothing actionable here to help the student. So most of your writing didn't really make sense. And then you give them two unrelated compliments that they're passionate and you really like their ideas. So instead of this, can somebody offer a different way to give critical feedback? You can go ahead and type it in the chat. Something that might be more congruent with a growth mindset. I think I can see when people are typing and no one is yet. So do we have any volunteers? Oh, Edith is going. Oh, it's okay. I put you all on the spot. I tend to do this more in a workshop, face-to-face kind of thing. So it's easier to read an audience than through a faceless chat box. So remember that growth mindset is about the process, about emphasizing that a combination of effort, help seeking, and effective strategy use would be good here. But critical feedback, sometimes we do need to acknowledge that there's a setback and that we can go forward from this. And so I think that's often what I hear when people give examples, is that this is going to help us learn and we're going to make a strategy and work together to go forward there. And that has a combined effect, not only saying that we can learn from this and that you can still learn, but also providing social assurance there. If you have more suggestions, go ahead and enter in the chat box. I'm going to just move on to another audience participation one. Yes, so Edith, that's a great point. Comparing math learning as mental conditioning as a physical workout, as physical conditioning. So we often say you can grow your brain like a muscle. I really find the concrete comparisons really helpful. What are other factors in your classroom that may foster or, I guess, prevent a growth mindset from forming in your students? Is there anything else? And again, go ahead and enter your thoughts in the chat box that you focus on when you want to promote the belief that you can learn in a setting. I'll give you a minute to go ahead and do that, and I'll share as people are writing in the chat box. If you think of all the elements in your classroom, what are some other things besides your everyday language and an initial article that you could use to help promote a growth mindset? And then after this, I'll briefly touch on the feeling of belonging. So Mari is typing. Anyone else have some thoughts to contribute? Oh, Edith and Mary. Yes, it's a wonderful point. So not only the content of what you say, but how you say it. So eye contact, positive emotion, voice, and then your rapport with students, your history with that student. We also find there's differences with email and in person, as you can imagine. We do have some tips around email, how to incorporate this language in emails, but it's much harder than face-to-face because, as Mari pointed out, you miss out on the eye contact and the emotions side. And I'll let Edith contribute before moving on to our last section here. No pressure, you can keep typing. Yes. Oh, so that's great. So providing scaffolds and making connections between previously learned material and material you're going to learn. This fits with what Anne talked about before with explicit connections, one of our core instructional design principles, but also showing them that learning is a process, that we build on our learning and it's all connected and helps us learn math in the end. So thank you guys so much for that. I do want to talk a little bit about one final belief called belonging uncertainty, which we see in our data is a big predictor of course success. So this is a belief, it's whether you question your belong in a setting or not. So it's really common for all of us to question our belonging when we enter a new social and academic setting. So when you enter a new classroom or you're at a party, you might look around for clues as to whether you belong in that setting or not. And this is especially true if you're targeted by stigma or negative stereotypes in that setting. So if there are there are stereotypes about you and whether you belong in that environment, and there are so many about different groups in higher education. And when you have this type of stigma and negative stereotype, burdening your thinking, it makes the meaning of negative social events much more ambiguous. So, for example, if you're in a study group and they forget to invite you, but you're certain that you belong in that setting, you can think of so many different external reasons as to why they might have not invited you. So maybe they forgot, maybe you missed their text or their email. There's many different reasons. And people who question their belonging will also have those same thoughts, but they add one more question is, do I belong here or don't I? Do they want me there? So it becomes really personal, becomes questioning whether people want them there or not. And here's some quotes we heard from students emphasizing the importance of this belief. So one says, I'm embarrassed to be at community college because high school teachers said I would end up at community college because I'm lazy. Another one said, I don't have any friends here. In between classes, I sit in my car and I see everyone talking to others and I wonder, how did everyone else make friends? And this is last one is really gets me a lot. Is I felt that if I stopped coming, no one would even notice. That they're not even noticed when they're absent from class. And we do a lot to try and prevent that belief from forming. But we see that students who have that belief, even 4 weeks in the class, so they're answering, how often, if ever, do you wonder, maybe I don't belong here, with a high level of uncertainty? 25% of those students who answer with a high level of uncertainty withdraw or fail to complete the first term. And those who remain, only 39% of them earn a B minus or above, compared to 55% of those students with no or low uncertainty. So again, this belief really affects your engagement in the class, in those everyday behaviors that will help you learn mathematics. So how do we assess, intervene and help students see that they can belong in this class? We do a multi-pronged approach, and here are just a few activities. One on there that's not there is an icebreaker. I know it's corny and cheesy, but we do want students to get to know one another and get to know you. If at all possible, you should always participate in your own icebreaker so students can learn about you as well. The next thing we do is we have them engage in a contract activity, which sounds really formal. But what it does is it makes their commitment to one another explicit and social. So in the contract, instead of things like I'm going to be prepared, I'm going to help others in my group learn math. I'm going to be supportive of others in this class. So in addition to the individual commitments, there's a group commitment as well. And they talk about this in their groups and form a shared sense of what it means to commit to the class. Another thing we see is really effective, especially for absences and people who use this routine, we see a median attendance rate of 85% or higher, is just regular communication with students when they're not there. And what you do is you just reach out every day or at least once a week saying, hey, I noticed you weren't in class, we missed you. Here's briefly what we covered. I hope to see you next week. And so you're letting them know that their absence was noted, that there's a path back to success, and that you're going to see them next time, that you want them there. And last is the student side of this. We call it the student group noticing routine, in which students take the role of noticing that their other group members are not there. So it's not punitive, they're not ratting out people who aren't there. It's just reaching out and letting them know that they were missed. And again, combination of these things had led to really high attendance rates, as well as belief that their professor cares about them and that they belong in mathematics. And just to end my section, I'm sorry, ending so close to time, I don't want you to come away that social and academic mindsets automatically lead to higher achievement. So this was a flaw of the self-esteem movement, that if we just think happy thoughts, happy things will happen. It's not entirely the case. What we see in the data and the research is that social and academic mindsets open us up to engage in these everyday behaviors, things that Anne described before, engaging in deliberate practice outside of class, engaging in classroom discussions and productive struggle. All these things are really important and lead to higher achievement in the class. So you learn the material better if you engage in these higher everyday behaviors. And what the great thing is that your higher achievement then reinforces your social and academic mindset. So you get this nice cycle of engagement. So I spoke earlier of a cycle of disengagement. This is the opposite. And this is why we act so early in the class, is to start this before doubt creeps in and people start disengaging. So I kick it back to Anne. to talk a little bit just about an event we have coming up. And then I don't think we have any time for more questions. So Anne, if you're there.
Yep, I'm right here. First, I want to say if you have any questions that you would like answers to now, feel free to email Rachel or me. And if you actually email this address down at the bottom here, pathways@carnegiefoundation.org, they can forward on to me and Rachel. Or Rachel's email address is beattie, Beattie, at carnegiefoundation.org. And I'm Edwards, Edwards, at carnegiefoundation.org. And what this last slide is about is an event that we're holding at the end of January for folks who are interested in learning more about Statway or Quantway. And we're holding it at the foundation, actually, at Stanford, California. I, of course, can answer questions about this, but you can also get online at our website to learn more about that. And our website is not on here, apparently. Is it on the next one? Yes. Pathways.carnegiehub.org. Thank you so much. I think that's it, right?
Hey, thank you guys for attending, everybody. I know we have an eval in the lower left-hand corner for today's event. For those who participated, if you want to take a second, you can click on that and fill out the form. Also, for those who are in the room, I know it looks like Kim and Deb are with us. The other people, can you give me your email address in the chat box so that we can send you some information later on and see how you enjoy this kind of stuff? And thanks, Rachel and Ann, again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much,
Thanks,
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.